Disrespectful tourist, manhandled the horse. The king's guard has had enough. Tourists from all over the world filled the area, cameras in hand, their voices blending into a constant hum of excitement and curiosity. Children ran ahead of their parents, pointing at the towering walls and the magnificent horses lined up beside the king's guard. The guards stood motionless, their dark uniforms crisp and polished, faces stern and unreadable, yet exuding an air of discipline that commanded respect. Among the crowd was a tourist named James. He was tall, wearing a bright red t-shirt and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his eyes. James had always traveled with confidence and a sense of entitlement, believing that the world existed to entertain him. Today, he had come to the palace to take pictures, but as he wandered through the courtyard, his attention shifted from the grand architecture to the majestic horses standing in a neat row beside the guards. Their coats gleamed in the sunlight, each muscle rippling as they shifted their weight from one leg to the other. They were magnificent animals, strong yet elegant, and James's eyes lit up with curiosity, but not with admiration. "Look at that one," James exclaimed loudly to no one in particular. "I want a picture with it. Come on, let's get closer." He began to push his way through the tourists, many of whom were already gathered near the railing. Some tried to warn him politely, but James waved them off, too eager to satisfy his own curiosity. He stopped in front of a large brown horse with a shiny black mane. The horse's ears twitched slightly as James approached, sensing the stranger's unusual energy. One of the king's guards, a tall man with a calm yet authoritative presence, noticed James moving too close. "Please, sir, do not touch the horse," the guard said politely, stepping forward. "These are royal horses and they are trained, but they are still animals. You must respect them." James smiled in a self-assured way, brushing off the warning. "Oh, don't worry, I just want a quick photo. It'll be fine," he said, reaching for the horse's reins. The horse flinched instantly. Its large eyes widened and it stepped back slightly, stamping its hoof nervously on the stone floor. Other tourists gasped, and some quickly moved away, sensing that the situation was becoming tense. The guards' expressions darkened, but they remained calm, knowing that patience was key in situations like this. "Sir, please step back," the guard repeated, his voice firmer now. "You cannot touch the horse. Stand behind the line." James laughed, thinking the guard was joking. He leaned closer to the horse, ignoring the signs and the warning. "Come on, I just want a picture. It won't bite," he said, grinning. The horse, however, did not seem to share his amusement. Its nostrils flared and it let out a soft snort. A small group of children nearby cried out in alarm, and one parent hurried to pull them back. The tension in the air grew heavier. The other guards exchanged quick glances. They had seen tourists act carelessly before, but James's behavior went beyond simple curiosity. This was reckless and it could hurt the horse or the tourist himself. One of the younger guards, a woman with sharp eyes and steady hands, took a small step forward. "Sir, I'm asking you for the last time," she said calmly but firmly. "Do not touch the horse. Move back immediately." James waved his hand dismissively. "Relax, I know what I'm doing. I've handled horses before," he said, though his confidence wavered slightly under the guard's serious expressions. Despite his words, the horse backed away instinctively, kicking a small cloud of dust into the air. James, frustrated that the animal was not cooperating, grabbed the reins with both hands and tried to pull it closer. The horse resisted, throwing its head from side to side. A loud clattering sound echoed across the courtyard as its hooves scraped against the stone. The crowd began to murmur. Tourists stepped back to avoid being caught in the commotion, while some whispered to each other about how disrespectful the man was being. "Look at that. He's being so rude," one woman said. "He could get hurt and the horse could too." The guards were now fully alert. One of the senior officers, a man with years of experience, stepped forward. His voice was steady and commanding. "Sir, You must stop immediately. You are endangering yourself and the horse. Step away now." James hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should listen. His pride made him want to assert control, but the seriousness in the officer's tone caused a flicker of doubt. The horse, sensing the tension, whinnied loudly and pawed at the ground. Its eyes were wide, and it shifted its weight nervously, ready to react to any sudden movement. Despite the warnings, James made a sudden move, trying to grab the horse's mane. The animal reacted instinctively, spinning away and forcing James to stumble backward. The crowd gasped again, and a few tourists quickly moved closer to the guards for protection. It was clear that the situation could escalate quickly if James did not calm down. One of the guards, moving with practiced efficiency, stepped in between James and the horse. He placed a firm hand on James's shoulder to stop him from moving closer. "That's enough. You are not allowed near the horse. You need to step back right now," the guard said, his voice filled with authority but not anger. James pulled back slightly, muttering under his breath, but his frustration was visible. He looked at the horse with a mixture of curiosity and annoyance, unable to understand why the guards were making such a big deal out of a simple photo. The horse, meanwhile, was calmed slightly by the guards' presence. It nickered softly and lowered its head, showing that it trusted them to protect it. The guards carefully guided it to stand still, ensuring that no one came too close. For the rest of the morning, James wandered around the courtyard, muttering and taking photos from a distance, clearly irritated but unwilling to admit defeat. The guards, however, remained alert, watching every movement to ensure that neither the horse nor the tourists were in danger. Other visitors took notice of the guards' professionalism, whispering among themselves about how disciplined and patient they were, even in the face of disrespect. By midday, the courtyard had returned to a more peaceful state. Tourists continued to admire the palace and its horses, but a respectful distance was maintained. The incident with James became a quiet lesson for everyone present, a reminder that some rules were not suggestions, but important measures to ensure safety and respect. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the guards resumed their silent vigil. Their expressions were calm but watchful, ready to act at the first sign of trouble. The horses, proud and dignified, stood tall, their eyes bright and alert. The palace courtyard returned to its rhythm, a place where tradition, discipline, and respect were more than words. They were the foundation of every action. And somewhere in the crowd, James finally realized that not every adventure could bend to his will. Some moments, he thought, were meant to be observed with care and respect, not grabbed for a quick photo. Though he did not fully admit it, a small seed of understanding had been planted, one that would, perhaps, guide him on his future travels. The courtyard had slowly returned to a calm rhythm, but the tension from the earlier incident still lingered in the air. The tourists were more cautious now, whispering among themselves, their eyes often flicking toward the guards and the majestic horses that seemed to stand taller, as if aware of their role in maintaining order. Even the children, who had been wide-eyed with excitement earlier, now stayed close to their parents, sensing that some invisible line had been crossed. James, the tourist who had caused the commotion, wandered around a little distance away, his camera hanging from his neck. He was muttering under his breath, frustrated that the guards had prevented him from getting his perfect photo. In his mind, it had been a harmless action, just a closer look at the horse, but the reaction of the guards had embarrassed him in front of the crowd. Still, he refused to admit that he had been wrong. Pride made him keep a casual posture, as though he belonged there and had the right to do as he pleased. Meanwhile, the guards gathered near one corner of the courtyard, speaking in low, measured tones. Their faces were serious, and there was a hint of frustration in their expressions. They were trained to remain calm, to show patience, and to handle difficult situations without aggression. But the behavior of some tourists tested that patience. They had endured careless gestures, loud talking, and minor disturbances countless times. This incident, however, was different. This was blatant disrespect, not just toward the horse, but toward the rules, toward the tradition, and toward the authority of the king's guard itself. "His attitude is reckless," said one of the guards quietly, a man named Thomas who had served in the palace for over 10 years. His voice was calm but firm. "It's one thing to get close, to admire the horses, but it's another to grab at them." This could have ended badly for both him and the horse. Another guard, a woman named Sophia, nodded. "I've tried warning him several times and he ignored us. We cannot allow this to become a habit. If we let one tourist behave like this, others might think it's acceptable too." Her sharp eyes scanned the courtyard, still keeping an observant watch on James, who was now pretending to be busy looking at the architecture but clearly still keeping one eye on the horses. The senior officer, Captain Harris, stepped forward. His uniform was impeccable and his posture spoke of years of discipline. "We must be ready," he said calmly. "Patience is a virtue, but there is a limit. If he continues to disrespect the rules, we will need to take stronger measures. We cannot risk the safety of our horses or the order of the courtyard." The other guards nodded in agreement, a silent understanding passing between them. They had all witnessed moments when tourists, though seemingly innocent, put themselves or others in danger. But this time, the warning had been ignored, and now the situation required careful attention. James, meanwhile, felt a surge of irritation. He had been enjoying his vacation, taking pictures and exploring the grand palace, but the earlier confrontation had left a bitter taste in his mouth. He didn't want to leave the area near the horses, despite knowing that the guards would be watching him closely. In his mind, he was determined to prove that he could handle the horse, that he wasn't afraid of a few rules. As he moved closer again, Sophia noticed his intent. She signaled to Thomas, and the two of them positioned themselves strategically between James and the nearest horse. The crowd, sensing that another potential conflict was brewing, began to give the space a wider berth. Some tourists whispered among themselves, their curiosity mixed with concern. "Sir, I must ask you again," Sophia said in a calm but firm tone. "Please step back and respect the horses. They are trained, but they are still animals. You cannot approach them this way." James smiled in a dismissive way. "Oh, I'm fine. I just want a quick picture, that's all," he said, moving a step closer to the horse despite her warning. The horse flinched, ears twitching, nostrils flaring. It stepped back instinctively, and the sound of its hooves scraping against the cobblestones echoed across the courtyard. The crowd gasped, some stepping back quickly and others taking a cautious look at the guards, hoping they would prevent any accident. Thomas stepped forward slightly, his voice calm but commanding. "Sir, this is your final warning. Do not touch the horse. Step back now." James paused for a moment, sensing the seriousness in the guard's tone. Pride made him hesitate, but deep down, a flicker of doubt entered his mind. Perhaps this wasn't just about getting a good photograph. Perhaps there was more at stake than he had realized. He reached out again, trying to grab the reins lightly. The horse reacted immediately, tossing its head and stepping sideways. James stumbled slightly, losing his balance. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and Sophia moved quickly to guide the horse away from him, her movements precise and careful. The senior officer, Captain Harris, stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Sir, enough," he said, his voice cutting through the crowd's murmurs. "Step away from the horse. Now." James stopped, startled by the firmness in the captain's voice. For the first time that morning, he felt the weight of the situation. He realized that the guards were not being overly strict. They were protecting the horse, the courtyard, and, indirectly, him. The embarrassment he felt slowly gave way to a reluctant respect for their authority. All right," James muttered, stepping back a little though he still had his camera ready. "I didn't mean any harm." Sophia and Thomas stayed close, ensuring that the horse remained calm. The animal lowered its head slightly, as if acknowledging that the danger had passed. Other tourists breathed a sigh of relief, some nodding to the guards in silent appreciation for their professionalism. The guards used the opportunity to reinforce the rules subtly but clearly. Sophia walked through the area, speaking in a gentle voice to the tourists, explaining that the horses were royal animals and that certain distances and precautions were necessary. The visitors listened attentively, many realizing that their own excitement could sometimes blind them to the importance of rules and respect. Meanwhile, James stood to the side, his camera hanging loosely around his neck. He watched the horse, noticing its calm movements, its elegant posture, and the way the guards moved with care and authority. Slowly, he began to understand that this was not just about taking a photograph. It was about discipline, respect, and the relationship between humans and animals. Time passed, and the courtyard gradually returned to its normal rhythm. Tourists moved freely, but now they maintained a respectful distance from the horses. Children played safely under the watchful eyes of their parents, and the guards resumed their silent, attentive watch. The sun climbed higher, casting shadows across the cobblestones and highlighting the grandeur of the palace walls. James, reflecting on the incident, realized that he had been reckless. He had let his curiosity and desire for attention cloud his judgment. The guards, patience and professionalism had prevented a potentially dangerous situation, and he felt a quiet sense of gratitude, though he struggled to admit it openly. As he walked away, he took one last careful look at the horse, appreciating its strength and grace from a safe distance. The horse seemed to return the acknowledgement in its own way, standing tall and proud, ready to continue its duty as a royal guardian. The guards exchanged brief nods, silently communicating that the situation was under control. They had faced a challenge, tested their patience, and maintained order without aggression. Their training, discipline, and respect for the animals had ensured the safety of everyone in the courtyard. By the time the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds, the courtyard was once again calm and orderly. The tourists continued their visit, now more aware of the rules and the importance of respecting both the animals and the guards. The incident with James became a quiet lesson in self-restraint and respect, a story that would be remembered by those who witnessed it. And though James still muttered complaints to himself, a small part of him had changed. He realized that some experiences were not meant to be rushed or controlled. They were meant to be observed, appreciated, and respected. The king's guard had shown him the importance of discipline and patience, and the lesson would stay with him, quietly shaping the way he viewed the world and the places he visited in the future. The afternoon sun glared down over the palace courtyard, turning the cobblestones golden and making the polished uniforms of the king's guard shine. The courtyard had largely returned to its normal rhythm, with tourists wandering around in awe of the towering walls, statues, and carefully tended gardens. Children skipped behind their parents, pointing at the grand horses that remained lined up in perfect formation beside the guards. Everything seemed calm, yet beneath the surface, the tension from earlier still lingered. James, the tourist who had caused the earlier disturbance, lingered a short distance from the horses. He wandered slowly, occasionally raising his camera as if trying to take a casual photograph. But the gleam of defiance in his eyes showed that he had not entirely let go of his desire to get closer. Pride and curiosity battled with a small sense of caution that had begun to creep into his mind. He wanted another chance to approach the horse, just a quick picture, just a little closer. The guards noticed him immediately. Thomas and Sophia exchanged subtle glances, silently communicating that they were prepared for any further reckless action. Captain Harris, standing tall near the center of the courtyard, watched James with a calm yet vigilant gaze. Years of experience had taught him that situations like this required careful management, patience, firmness, and sometimes decisive intervention. Sophia stepped forward slightly, her voice polite but firm. "Sir, please stay behind the line, do not approach the horse." James waved his hand dismissively, a smug smile forming on his face. "I'm just looking. I won't touch it, relax." The horse nearest him flicked its tail and pawed the ground nervously. Its ears twitched, sensing James's tension and unpredictability. It was clear to anyone watching that even a small misstep could startle the animal. The crowd nearby shifted uneasily, sensing that another confrontation could erupt at any moment. Thomas took a step closer, positioning himself between James and the horse. "Sir, we have warned you before. This is your final warning. Step back now." James hesitated, the stubbornness in his eyes mixing with a flicker of doubt. He had been warned, yes, but he also felt that the guards were overreacting. In his mind, he believed that a tourist should be allowed to get closer for a photograph if they acted carefully. He adjusted his camera and inched forward a tiny bit, thinking he could take a quick shot without trouble. The horse flinched sharply, its large eyes widening. Its hooves scraped against the stone floor, echoing in the courtyard. Nearby tourists gasped and instinctively stepped back, murmuring among themselves. Some whispered that the man was foolish, while others worried for his safety. Captain Harris moved closer, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Sir, step back now." His voice cut clearly through the murmurs of the crowd. "You have been warned repeatedly. Do not approach the horse any further." James froze, sensing the seriousness in the captain's tone. For the first time, he realized that the guards were not joking or being overprotective. They were guarding not just the horses but also the safety of everyone in the courtyard, including him. The sternness in Captain Harris's voice carried weight, and the crowd watched silently, waiting to see what would happen next. Despite this, James's pride would not let him retreat entirely. He muttered under his breath, "I just want a picture. It's harmless." And with that, he took another step forward, reaching slightly toward the horse's mane. The horse reacted immediately. Its head shot up, nostrils flaring, and it let out a loud, warning snort. The crowd gasped. Children cried out, and parents stepped quickly to shield them. The horse's muscles tensed, ready to react to any sudden movement. Sophia and Thomas moved with swift precision. Thomas placed a firm hand on James's shoulder to stop him, while Sophia guided the horse back slightly, ensuring it remained calm. Captain Harris stepped directly in front of James, his eyes steady, his posture firm. "This is enough," the captain said loudly, his voice echoing across the courtyard. "You have been warned several times. You will not approach the horse. Step back immediately, or we will remove you from this area." James's eyes widened as he felt the authority of the captain pressing down on him. For the first time, he understood that this was not about a photograph. This was about respect, rules, and safety. He took a step back reluctantly, his camera still in his hand, though he no longer dared to raise it toward the horse. The crowd murmured, many expressing silent relief. Some nodded toward the guards, acknowledging their professionalism and discipline. The children peeked from behind their parents, their eyes wide as they watched the scene unfold. It was clear to everyone that the guards had maintained order without any need for harsh words or physical force beyond what was necessary. Captain Harris did not relax immediately. He stood tall, watching James carefully, ensuring that the tourist understood the seriousness of the situation. The guards nearby maintained their positions, forming a protective barrier between the man and the horses. The horses themselves gradually calmed, their heads lowering and tails swishing gently, as if acknowledging the presence of their guardians. James finally muttered a quiet, "All right, I get it," though the words sounded more like a concession than an admission of understanding. He stayed back, watching the horse from a safe distance. Slowly, a sense of humility began to creep into his demeanor. For the first time, he realized that his earlier confidence had been misplaced. He had underestimated the importance of rules and the skill of the guards who ensured the safety of both animals and people. Thomas and Sophia exchanged subtle nods, silently communicating that the situation was now under control. The other tourists began to relax, some returning to admire the horses from a respectful distance. Parents whispered to their children about the importance of following rules and respecting animals, using the incident as a teaching moment. Captain Harris addressed James once more, his voice calm but firm. "You must understand, sir, that these are royal horses. They are trained, but they are still animals. One careless action could cause injury. You are expected to respect this boundary." James nodded, now fully aware that he had crossed a line. He lowered his camera and looked at the horse with genuine appreciation. It was strong, graceful, and alert, a living symbol of tradition and discipline. He realized that the guards' vigilance was not just about authority. It was about care, responsibility, and respect. As the afternoon passed, the courtyard gradually returned to normal. Tourists continued their visit, but now they were more mindful of the boundaries and the rules. Children played safely, couples strolled slowly, and photographers adjusted their cameras, making sure to observe from a distance. The guards resumed their silent watch, remaining alert but composed. James lingered a little longer, observing the horse from afar. The animal stood tall, its coat shining in the sunlight, and the guards moved with quiet precision, maintaining their positions. He realized that his desire for attention and the perfect photograph had blinded him to the value of patience and respect. A quiet sense of understanding settled within him, even if he did not yet fully admit it out loud. Nearby tourists whispered among themselves, some impressed by the guards' discipline, others reflecting on the incident as a lesson in respecting rules and animals. The palace courtyard had returned to order, but the memory of the tense confrontation lingered in everyone's mind. It was a reminder that discipline, patience, and respect were not just ideals, they were necessary for safety and harmony. Captain Harris watched the scene carefully, satisfied that the situation had been diffused without conflict. He signaled to Sophia and Thomas, and the three of them began to relax their posture slightly, though their attention never wavered. The guards knew that even small acts of disrespect could escalate quickly if ignored. Their role was not just to guard the horses, but to maintain a sense of order, tradition, and safety for all visitors. James finally turned away, walking slowly toward the palace gates. He carried his camera, but now it was lowered, no longer a tool for reckless pursuit of a photo. The lesson he had learned in the courtyard was clear. Some things were not meant to be taken lightly. Respect, patience, and careful observation mattered more than pride or impulse. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, the courtyard settled into a quiet rhythm. The horses remained proud and alert, the guards vigilant yet composed, and the tourists moved with newfound awareness. The incident with James had ended, but its lessons lingered, quietly shaping the behavior of those who had witnessed it. And though James still walked with a hint of embarrassment, a small part of him had changed. He realized that some moments, some experiences, were not about taking control or seeking attention. They were about observing, appreciating, and respecting the world around him. The King's Guard had demonstrated that discipline and care were not signs of rigidity, but of strength, responsibility, and dedication. The sun had climbed higher into the sky, casting long, crisp shadows across the cobblestones of the palace courtyard. The horses, proud and alert, stood in perfect formation beside the guards, their coats gleaming in the bright light. The courtyard was bustling with tourists, but the earlier tension still hung in the air like a quiet, invisible reminder. Every step James took seemed to draw the attention of the guards, who were now fully alert and ready to act if necessary. James lingered near the horse again, his camera in hand, pretending to study the palace walls, yet his eyes kept darting toward the magnificent animal. His pride would not allow him to admit he had been wrong, and he still believed he could take a photo if he was careful. But unlike before, the guards were prepared, and their patience, though immense, had limits. Captain Harris, standing at the center of the courtyard, observed James closely. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the situation with practiced precision. Years of experience had taught him to remain composed, even under provocation, but he also knew that some situations required decisive action. This was one of those moments. Sophia stepped slightly forward, her posture firm but non-threatening. "Sir, please step back from the horse. You have been warned several times. For your safety and the safety of the animal, you cannot approach any closer." James smiled, trying to mask his growing anxiety with bravado. "Relax, I'm just taking a picture." "It's harmless," he said, stepping slightly closer. The horse, sensing the uncertainty and tension, shifted its weight and stamped a hoof nervously. Its ears flicked backward and it let out a soft whinny. The sound drew the attention of nearby tourists, some of whom gasped and whispered to each other. The crowd sensed that the situation could escalate at any moment. Thomas, standing at James's side, placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Sir, we are not asking any more. This is your final warning. Step back immediately or we will remove you from this area," he said, his voice calm but commanding. James hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. For a moment he considered stepping back, but his pride pushed him forward. "I know what I'm doing," he muttered under his breath. He reached out toward the horse, attempting to grab the reins lightly. The horse reacted instantly, tossing its head and taking a small step backward. Its eyes were wide with alarm, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder. Children clung to their parents, and other tourists moved cautiously out of the way. The tension in the courtyard was palpable, like a held breath waiting to be released. Captain Harris stepped directly in front of James, placing himself between the man and the horse. "That is enough," he said, his voice loud and firm, carrying authority across the courtyard. "You have been warned repeatedly. You are not permitted near this horse. Step back immediately or you will be removed from this area." James's eyes widened as he realized the seriousness of the captain's tone. He had thought the guards were strict but patient. Now he understood that they meant what they said. The sternness in Captain Harris's voice left no room for argument. The crowd fell silent, waiting to see what would happen next. James muttered, all right," but his tone lacked conviction. He moved backward a small step, still holding his camera. The guards, sensing that his retreat was not genuine, remained alert. They knew that appearances could be deceiving, and that any sudden movement could startle the horse. Sophia motioned to Thomas, and together they positioned themselves strategically to guide the horse safely away from James if needed. The horse, now calmer but still alert, shifted slightly closer to the guards, trusting their experience and authority. Captain Harris's presence alone seemed to command respect from both the tourist and the horse. James took another small step forward, his camera rising slightly. "Just one picture," he muttered, his voice almost to himself. At that moment the horse twitched nervously, sensing the movement. Its hooves scraped against the cobblestones and it let out a louder snort. The crowd gasped and several parents quickly pulled their children closer. The tension in the courtyard surged. Captain Harris did not hesitate. With calm precision, he stepped closer and firmly placed a hand on James's shoulder. "Sir, this is your final warning. You are leaving this area immediately," he said. His voice carried no anger, only authority, but it was impossible to ignore. James stumbled slightly, caught between pride and fear. For a moment he froze, realizing that the situation was more serious than he had anticipated. He could no longer claim ignorance. He had been warned multiple times, and now the guards were ready to act decisively. Seeing that James hesitated, Sophia gently guided the horse backward, using soft movements to calm it further. Thomas remained close to James, ensuring he could not move closer to the animal. The tension in the courtyard was thick, and all eyes were on the unfolding scene. Finally, James took a deep breath and stepped back fully, lowering his camera. He looked at the horse, really looking this time, and noticed the power and elegance of the animal. Its coat gleamed, muscles rippled under the sunlight, and its eyes reflected alert intelligence. For the first time, he appreciated that this was not just an ordinary animal, it was a trained guardian, a symbol of discipline and tradition. Captain Harris spoke once more, his tone steady. "Sir, you must understand that these horses are trained, but they are still animals. They can react unpredictably, and one careless action could cause injury. You are expected to respect this boundary." James nodded, feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment. He lowered his camera completely, no longer daring to raise it toward the horse. He finally understood that this was not about taking a photograph. It was about respect, patience, and safety. The crowd relaxed, murmurs of approval spreading among the tourists. Many whispered about the professionalism of the guards, impressed by their calm yet decisive handling of the situation. Children peeked from behind their parents, wide-eyed, learning an unspoken lesson about rules and respect. The horse, now calm, lowered its head slightly and swished its tail. Its trust in the guards was evident, and the animal stood proudly, alert but not tense. The guards maintained their positions, ensuring that both James and the crowd understood that the boundary was absolute. James finally turned away, walking slowly toward the palace gates. He carried his camera, but it was no longer a tool for recklessness. It was now simply a reminder of the lesson he had learned. Respect and caution mattered more than pride or impulse. As the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the courtyard, the scene settled into a quiet rhythm. Tourists moved carefully, children played safely under the watchful eyes of their parents, and the guards resumed their disciplined positions, alert but composed. The horses stood tall, proud, and dignified, a living symbol of the strength and discipline of the king's guard. Captain Harris, Sophia, and Thomas exchanged subtle nods. The situation had been resolved without conflict, but the message was clear. Rules were not suggestions, and respect was not optional. The guards had acted decisively when patience had been tested, ensuring the safety of everyone while maintaining dignity and order. James paused for a final glance at the horse. Its coat glimmered in the fading sunlight, and it stood tall, unwavering. He realized that the experience had taught him more than any photograph ever could. Some things were not meant to be taken lightly. They required observation, patience, and above all, respect. As he left the courtyard, he reflected quietly on the lessons of the day. The king's guard had shown discipline, authority, and care. They had protected both the animals and the visitors without aggression, using only presence, skill, and patience. James understood that the world was full of boundaries and rules that existed for good reasons, and that sometimes the greatest strength was restraint. The courtyard gradually emptied, the sounds of laughter and conversation returning. The guards continued their watch, their posture steady, eyes alert. The horses remained majestic and calm, their trust in the guardians unshaken. The incident with James became a quiet memory, a story to be reflected upon, a lesson in respect that lingered long after the tourists had gone. And though James walked away with a hint of embarrassment, a small part of him had changed. He realized that respect was not a choice, it was a responsibility. The king's guard had reminded him, and all who witnessed the scene, that discipline, patience, and care were the foundations of safety and harmony. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the palace walls, casting long, golden shadows across the cobblestones of the courtyard. The bustle of tourists had quieted, replaced by a calm hum of visitors strolling carefully and observing the magnificent horses from a safe distance. The air still carried the faint tension from earlier, but it was softened now by relief and understanding. The courtyard had returned to its rhythm, yet the lessons of the day lingered quietly in the minds of those who had witnessed the events unfold. James walked slowly toward the far end of the courtyard, his camera hanging loosely around his neck. He had stopped trying to get a closer look at the horses, understanding now that his previous behavior had been reckless. Each step he took was measured, almost thoughtful, as if the reality of what had happened was finally sinking in. He glanced over his shoulder at the horses, noticing their alert yet calm posture, their shiny coats reflecting the sunlight, and the way they moved with precise, controlled steps. For the first time, he truly appreciated their elegance and strength. The king's guard remained vigilant. Captain Harris stood tall at the center of the courtyard, his posture calm but commanding. Sophia and Thomas flanked him, ready to act if needed. Though the immediate threat had passed, their attention never wavered. Experience had taught them that respect for boundaries was not always automatic, and some visitors might need gentle reminders. But the display of patience, firmness, and care had left a visible impression on the crowd. Tourists whispered among themselves, sharing impressions of the guards' professionalism, noting how smoothly they had handled a tense situation without resorting to harshness or aggression. Nearby, a group of children pointed at the horses, whispering excitedly to their parents about the animals' strength and beauty. Parents smiled, using the opportunity to remind their children gently about safety and respect. "See," one parent said softly, "we have to watch animals carefully and follow the rules. It keeps everyone safe." The children nodded, wide-eyed, understanding the lesson in a way that words alone might not have conveyed. James paused for a moment, watching the horse that had caused all the earlier tension. The animal's head moved slowly as it shifted its weight, sniffing the air and flicking its tail. Its calm yet alert stance reminded him that it was trained for precision, yet it was still a living creature with instincts and awareness. He realized that the guard's role was not only to maintain order but also to protect these majestic animals, who had a delicate balance between strength and vulnerability. Captain Harris noticed James lingering and spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Sir, I hope you understand now why the rules exist. These horses are trained, but they are still animals. One careless movement could have caused serious harm to you, to the horse, or to others around." James swallowed and nodded. I understand," he admitted quietly. It was the first time he had spoken with genuine humility since the incident began. He had been reckless, proud, and dismissive of the rules, but now he felt the weight of responsibility and the importance of respecting both the animals and the authority of the guards. Sophia stepped closer to the horse, checking its demeanor carefully. The animal was calm, its muscles relaxed, and its breathing steady. She ran a hand lightly along its neck, reassuring it, and whispered soothingly to maintain trust and comfort. The horse responded with a gentle nicker, showing that it was aware of the protection and care provided by the guards. James observed quietly, realizing that the bond between the animals and their guardians was based on mutual respect, discipline, and careful training. Tourists continued to take pictures from a safe distance, their movements cautious but enthusiastic. They spoke quietly to each other about the importance of following rules and respecting the animals. Some of them had witnessed James's reckless behavior firsthand, and the guards' measured intervention had left a lasting impression. It was clear to everyone that discipline and patience were not weaknesses, but essential qualities for maintaining safety and harmony in a busy, public space. James's thoughts wandered as he watched the horse and guards. He thought about how easy it had been to let pride and curiosity override common sense, and how quickly that could have led to disaster. He realized that some experiences required observation, patience, and respect, rather than control or impulsive action. The guards had shown him, without anger or harshness, the true meaning of discipline. Their professionalism had protected everyone, and their calm authority had diffused tension while teaching an important lesson. As the sun continued to lower, the courtyard took on a warm, golden glow. Shadows stretched long across the cobblestones, and the palace walls reflected the sunlight in shimmering patterns. The atmosphere had shifted from tension to calm admiration. Tourists paused to take in the scenery, noticing not only the beauty of the horses and the palace, but also the skill and dedication of the guards. Captain Harris, Sophia, and Thomas remained vigilant, but their eyes reflected satisfaction. They had handled the day's challenge without incident, demonstrating both authority and care. James finally adjusted his camera, lowering it to his chest. He took a deep breath and observed the horse one last time. He noticed the elegance in its movements, the discipline in its posture, and the intelligence in its eyes. For the first time, he truly appreciated the complexity and beauty of these animals. More importantly, he understood the responsibility of those who cared for them, the patience required to maintain control, and the importance of respecting both rules and boundaries. He began to walk slowly toward the exit of the courtyard, each step measured and thoughtful. The guards remained in their positions, eyes following his movements, ensuring that the lesson had been absorbed and that no further reckless actions occurred. The crowd, now calm and orderly, continued to move through the palace grounds, their earlier excitement tempered by newfound awareness. As James passed by Captain Harris, he paused and nodded respectfully. "Thank you," he said quietly. I understand now." The captain acknowledged the gesture with a subtle nod, his expression composed but approving. "Remember, respect and patience are as important as curiosity. They keep everyone safe and maintain the harmony of this place." James walked on, reflecting on the events of the day. The incident had begun with carelessness and pride, but it had ended with understanding and humility. He realized that respect for rules, animals, and authority was not restrictive, it was protective. It allowed people to experience places of beauty and tradition safely and fully. The horses continued to stand proudly, their heads held high, muscles rippling with every small movement. The guards remained alert, but their expressions reflected quiet satisfaction. They had faced a challenge, maintained order, and ensured safety without conflict. The lesson had been learned, and the courtyard had returned to a state of calm admiration, where visitors could appreciate the beauty and tradition of the palace safely. James paused at the gates of the courtyard for one final glance. He watched the guards, their disciplined posture, and the horses, majestic and alert. He realized that the day had taught him far more than he had expected. Respect, patience, and understanding were more valuable than a single photograph or moment of attention. They were the foundation of safety, trust, and harmony. As he left the courtyard, he carried not only memories of the palace and its magnificent horses but also a quiet sense of humility. He had learned that curiosity was valuable, but only when balanced with care and respect. The king's guard had shown him the importance of discipline, patience, and authority used wisely. The afternoon faded into evening, the palace walls glowing softly in the warm light. The courtyard grew quieter, tourists departing or moving to other areas, but the lessons of the day remained. The guards remained vigilant, as they always did, ensuring that safety and order were preserved. The horses, calm and dignified, stood as living symbols of strength, elegance, and trust. And though James had left the courtyard, the memory of the incident remained with him. He understood now that boundaries existed for good reason, that respect was essential, and that true courage sometimes meant stepping back and observing rather than forcing control. The king's guard had shown, through patience, firmness, and care, the importance of these lessons, not just for tourists, but for everyone who entered the palace grounds. The palace courtyard returned to its peaceful rhythm, the golden light fading into the soft hues of evening. The horses, standing tall and majestic, reflected the discipline and training instilled in them by their guardians. The guards continued their watch, calm and vigilant, a quiet testament to the power of patience and responsibility. And somewhere beyond the gates, James carried with him a newfound understanding of respect, humility, and the value of careful observation. The day had ended, but the lessons endured.